Good day, Tesseract teachers and leaders. Chris Shore here again. We're returning to our Tesseract project, moving on to a new component of it, so you'll see a different representation of the Tesseract. I really like the silver and gold here, the nodes. We had that conversation about the various vertices, and the structure, and the predictions that it gives us. But we're going a completely different direction today. So we've really been hammering the structure piece and the PLC meeting protocols. And now we're going to take a little fresh tact for our long-term plan of professional development for our math leaders and teachers. And so let's take a look at and remind ourselves of what the purpose is. The purpose of the Tesseract project is to radically improve, and that's going to be our focus today. I think what we talk about today is a key component to really launching improvement at our schools. It was one of the things, and I'll share that story, is one of the things I put in the email when I left Great Oak as a math coach to go to Chaparral as a math coach several years ago. And we're going to discuss that very thing today. We're going to radically improve the math education in our schools through the focus and customized professional development of our leadership. And our three axioms, there's our teacher again. We know the kids don't improve until the teacher improves. So it is the teacher that's going to lift the kids. But the issue is, and we talked about this before, is we're running around and we're trying to throw all these different switches and ask the teachers to do all these different things. And remember, Peter Senge said, don't do that. Look for leverage. Where's the one place you can apply pressure? I love this graphic. You apply a little bit of pressure on the handle there, and all the gears turn. You don't have to go and individually crank all those different gears. You just need to find where on the system to apply that pressure. And as we've been saying, that lever is the PLC. And so our symbolism, as I shared, is going to take a little different tact here. So instead of talking about the mathematical properties of the Tesseract, I'm going to talk about the progressive heavy metal rock band Tesseract. That's actually their name. Notice their logo there. It's our Tesseract with the insides kind of twisted, which is really interesting and representative of what we're talking about today, because they represent for us today innovation. And I'm going to share that with you by having you listen to just 20 seconds of one of their songs. Listen to that guitar, that different sound. So before I get too lost in that awesome jam, I want to get back to our lesson here, and that is our conversation here. And that is that Tesseract, what they made famous is a way of playing guitar called Digent. And I think that's how to properly pronounce it. My French isn't that good, and since there's consonants in there you don't pronounce, I'm assuming it's French. But actually it's Dient is how you pronounce it. And it's basically kind of, if you'll see the guy second from the left, you'll see he's kind of like playing the guitar on the frets instead of with his fingertips, kind of with the flat parts of his fingers and his palms, and he kind of slaps at the guitar. So it's a style, and that's the different sound that you heard. They're applying that to a very heavy metal sound. So they are known for this innovation and being leaders in that field. So we're going to be looking at ways that we can innovate, that we can rethink the way school and particularly math education is done. And we're doing that on the line where it's no options engagement. I'm going to have some conversations about what this means, where it comes from, because it's not me. I'm just going to frame the dialogue. And we want to talk about this. The actual ways to get this done are quite varied. And that's where you're going to be doing the work. How's it going to look at your school? Elementary is going to look different than middle and high school. One end of town is going to look different than another. One staff, it needs to run differently than another. But I'm going to frame the dialogue and the kinds of things that we want to be talking about here. And it's on our notes, one of the top things on the instructional focus for us. So I'm going to start with William Dufour. That's the actor. Rick Dufour. Rick Dufour is the king of the PLC movement, as most of you know. He was the department chair, then assistant principal, principal assistant, all the way up to superintendent of Adley Stevenson. And he and Tim Kanold implemented the PLC system there. And he was the one in the training that I went to in Palm Springs that made this statement that the most loving thing that we can do for our students is demand their very best. And so demand of them to give their best effort. We do that as parents with our children. So if we really, truly love our kids, our students, and want the best for them, then we will demand the best out of them. So one of the things that a lot of people talk about, we ourselves in this district, is this whole idea of collaborative time with teachers as the focal point of the PLC. And it is, which is why we spent so much time on the protocols for those meetings. But one of the things that went on at Adley Stevenson that we don't pay enough attention to is how they made sure that every kid participated in class and every kid completed every assignment that was given to them. So their intervention, just to give you an example of what they did, their intervention was a half hour that butted up right against lunch. So if you were a student and you were passing all your classes and you had all your assignments in, you got an hour-long lunch. But if you were missing any assignments, then that half hour was spent with you just sitting down and getting the work done. It wasn't even an instructional intervention trying to teach you content. It was just getting your butt in a chair and getting you to do that. And one of the things that Rick DeFore said is a lot of the kids don't go home to places where they have a place to do homework, so the school has to provide that. So we're not punishing them. We are loving them by putting them in the seat and making them get their work done. And then once that's all done, then you run your formative assessments, and then you'll really know who needs the instructional intervention. So that's what they did at Adley Stevenson High School. They had every kid making sure they were participating in every lesson, and they completed every assignment. On the right there is Doug Reeves. Many of you have heard of this gentleman. Does a lot of research, particularly on grading. He speaks a lot about the not using averages and eliminating the use of a 0 on a 100-point scale. So he has that conversation. One of the things that I really like about what he shares is redefining accountability. That accountability is not giving a 0 on something that a kid fails to turn in, but accountability is making the kid make up the assignment. So if you did that, here's the interesting piece. The whole idea of not doing zeros on a 100-point scale becomes a moot point. It becomes irrelevant. If all of your students are turning in their grades, they're not collecting zeros. So you don't have to worry about whether you're getting a 0 or 50% or teaching on a rubric. And these are all things that I've done in the last few years that I was in the classroom. But his point is, if we're getting every kid to do every assignment and doing their best, then it actually becomes an irrelevant argument. Which also leads to Uri Treisman, a huge researcher out of University of Texas, Austin, as you see there. And I heard him speak recently, and one of the things he was talking about was that if we take kids that aren't doing assignments and you put them in intervention, then you might be applying the wrong solution to the problem. And so you don't go putting kids in intervention and give them instructional support if their issue is that they're just not playing school. So you get the kids, this is the point of all three of them, you get the kids to play school. Then once everybody has all their assignments in and they're given their best on the assessments, then you really know who needs help and intervention. And then there's another gentleman that we all know, Marvin Morton. When Marvin was assistant principal at Chaparral and I was the math coach there, I remember Marvin in a staff senate meeting when we were talking about this very thing with intervention. And one of the things he said that has stuck in my head is that he did well in school not because he was motivated, but because his dad was motivated. And so his dad made him do his work. But we don't have that kind of environment for every kid. So Marvin's point was, for those kids that don't have the parents at home making them do the work, the school needs to step in and make them do the work. He succeeded not because he was a better kid than somebody, it's because he had more accountability at home than other kids. And so we need to bring that accountability into the school. So that's really what the no options piece is all about. So here's the kind of stuff that you're going to ponder. And as always, I'm just framing the dialogue. You can go elsewhere and come up with other ideas and add it to this. But we're looking at push-in, meaning We are not looking for kids. Oh, I'm sorry. You're special ed and you don't participate and you don't really play school that well. So we're going to take you out of the mainstream and we're going to go put you in that class over there. We'll have far more of our special ed and EL kids succeed if we support and demand this push-in model. In other words, they sit in the Gen Ed classes, and then we don't just have an aide sitting there giving them answers to everything. We actually demand that the kids participate. And that's the pull-in part. Push-in is make sure the kids are sitting in those classes as much as we possibly can. And then the pull-in is to make sure that they are engaged. You didn't have to push my daughter in and pull her into the lessons. My daughter was an AP student. She did that. My son, who was on an IEP since fourth grade, and because of those struggles, was very discouraged and was looking for ways out. So if we had any kind of sympathy for him, we would not enable that behavior. We would make sure he was sitting in the mainstream classes, and then we would make sure that he was doing all the work and getting all the assignments in. And Preston graduated high school and completed NC2A requirements to play college ball his freshman year. So these things work if we do them correctly. And then the 100% grade book, that is going back to Doug Reeves' point, not putting in zeros, not letting kids off the hook. This goes back to Rick DeForce saying also, and Tim Kanold, and the stories that they tell kind of ties into what Doug Reeves was saying about accountability. That as parents, we know if we tell kids to do chores, if I say, hey, son, time to take out the trash, and Riley, clean your room. And they say, well, we're not feeling it right now. And I would just say, well, you know what? I'm going to put a 0 in the chore book, and that's going to teach you how to grow up and be a responsible adult. No, I as a parent made sure, excuse me, I am the parent. I said do your chores. You're doing your chores. That's the way it rolls. And so if we, again, love our students, then we will make the same demands of our kids. We tell them they're going to do these assignments. They choose not to do the assignments. There has to be not a consequence like a 0, but some kind of movement, leverage within the system that pushes these kids into a space where they have to complete this work. And then we have the PBIS progression. I'm going to go to Sandy McKay. One of the reasons I got really excited about Tesseract was seeing just how well her kids were behaved. The students at her school were behaving and engaging in the lessons when I was there observing. And she was talking to me about how she didn't roll PBIS out in 1 year, but she did it over 6 or 7 years. And so that started the conversation. Of course, that perked up my ears because I'm talking about 6 or 7 years here, and all improvement seems to be falling in that range of numbers. So Sandy, you kind of shown that experience there. And I'm really excited to learn and have all of us learn about her success at Temecula Elementary and what she did with that. So that's going to be there. I'm listing it because I don't have Sandy's experience. I'm going to say the PBIS progression will start in whatever year within the 6-year plan. And then when we get together on the 21st, hopefully Sandy can join us and she can share with us some of her insights about how that will fit in. Then we have group norms. Kids don't know how to work together. We need to teach them how to behave in groups with each other and good academic, scholarly behavior, and how to do mathematical discourse. You can't just put kids in groups and say, turn and talk, because then they say things that you really don't want to hear. So we need to train teachers on how to train the kids with the group norms and the discourse. But of course, we can't do all that next year. That's not all going to happen by November. And so we need to lay out in the plan where that goes and any other ideas that you have about no options engagement. I'll give you an example. Marvin, going back to things, said, well, why are we letting kids go to school dances if they're failing classes? And maybe we should be going around as administrators and sitting in front of classes randomly and kids that are missing things, giving them some kind of detention slip where they have to come in and make up the work. That's not on the list, but that's a great idea. So Marvin can go and throw that on there and then bring it with him hopefully on the 21st and share that with us. So that's what you're doing. You're going to go to student.desmos if you like using the card sort and moving those things around. Adding your own, but then you're going to go to your Google Sheet plan and you're filling in, remember, on the right side first, what would it ultimately look like if every kid was doing their part? What would that look like? And then go ahead and fill out where they would fall in those 6 years. All right. So that's your lesson 7 of the Tesseract, no options engagement. Go to Google Classroom, do the 5th lesson on Desmos, record your 6-year plan, and the 21st is coming up in just a couple of weeks. So go ahead and get these done and bring that plan completed then, because we're rocking it.